You may know favelas as colorful neighborhoods in Rio de Janeiro, often depicted on American movie screens. They are often romanticized, but this romantic view is rarely the case in real life. Favelas are an umbrella term used to denote Brazilian extraordinary housing tenements, otherwise known as slums. Most favelas appeared in the 1970s, generally caused by rural exodus as well as immigration. 6% of Brazil's total population lives in these slums, and there are favelas in 323 out of 5,565 Brazilian municipalities. I was originally going to attempt to map out the favelas, but they are extremely hard to track. Because these settlements are informal, they lack proper government tracking, and the borders of a favela can change day to day. On maps, they look like no information voids. Favelas share this dubious no info title with Greenland and Western Sahara, as well as North Korea and the Vatican. People from favelas are known as favelados, and they make up a significant urban underclass. They are oftentimes victims of discrimination, exploitation, and violence, both by the state and the various narco trafficking organizations that run these informal settlements. The first favelas emerged at the end of the 1800s. Slaves had been freed in 1888, and Brazil was just beginning to industrialize. There was also a decline in coffee production in the Paraíba Valley, a key agricultural area at the time. As a result, massive urban migrations began as Brazilians searched for work and opportunities in the cities. Many of these people moved to Rio de Janeiro. The internal migrants moving over land were only matched by the external migrants moving overseas. Boatloads of European immigrants came in from the east. This led to massive urban growth without proper housing for everyone. Temporary tenements began to be constructed in order to meet demand. By 1897, the first favela emerged in the old Morro de Santo Antonio. It was populated by soldiers from the War of Canudos, a conflict between the First Brazilian Republic and a millenarian cult in the northeastern state of Bahia. It was basically a Brazilian-style typing rebellion, complete with militarized religious cult. During the conflict, many soldiers were housed on hills containing favela plants. These plants caused itchy skin rashes, and you could probably guess that living under these plants day in and day out would be unpleasant, but to the soldiers they became a symbol of shelter. When these soldiers returned to Rio, they ended up giving the name favela to the neighborhoods in which they settled. And settle they did. Once the war ended, over 20,000 soldiers moved to the cities for work, many of whom were housed in the already heavily populated Morro da Providencia. These early favelas were deemed to be dirty and undesirable slums filled with undesirable people by the city's elites. There was no trash services, no mail, and no proper roads. It was abysmal. Francisco Pereira Passos, a mayor and city planner of Brazil during 1902, began to carry out citywide reforms with road openings and expansions, as well as more affluent families being encouraged to set up shop in the central districts. Another one of Francisco's strategies was to remove the favelas altogether. In 1893, the first large-scale clearing operation began. It resulted in 2,000 people evicted from their homes in the Cabeça de Porco tenement. So what happened to the people of the favela? They had their entire lives destroyed. That's what happened. Imagine being poor and someone coming to your house with all of your few items, your guitars, books, clothes, your bed, and it was all torn down. It's a traumatic experience to have, everything you know and everything you worked for destroyed. In fact, I'd argue that this state action was just as violent as any robbery committed by a lowly crook, and it wouldn't be the first nor the last act of violence perpetrated by the Brazilian government. As a result, the residents of the favelas in Rio moved to different parts of the city and built new houses, this time steering towards the more undesirable hills in the hinterlands. A cycle emerged. The state would clear favelas would re-emerge in another part of the city as people attempted to find positive employment, elites would be upset by the undesirables in the city, and the favelas would be cleared again. Rinse, repeat. This back and forth between the state and the perpetually stepped-on underclass would continue throughout Brazil's history, with a shocking amount of continuity. From the Estado Novo to the military dictatorship of the 60s to the current democracy in place today, the various Brazilian governments would engage in anti-favela actions consistently. Between 1965 and 1974, under the military dictatorship, 80 favelas were victims of anti-favela actions. 26,000 shacks were destroyed and 139,000 people were removed by the government. And because of the famous brutality of the militarists, many favela residents were victims of torture and were killed. Why were these government actions directed towards the weakest members of society? Because A, they were deemed undesirable, and B, because they could. Favela residents did not have the money nor support to push back against oppression. Even if the dictatorship allowed them a lawyer, they wouldn't be able to afford one. And even if you were one of those who avoided getting kidnapped by mass state agents for no apparent reason, you'd still be at risk of having your entire house and life destroyed during favela clearings. Basically, being a favela resident was terrible, and it would continue to suck. During the late 70s and 80s, after the dictatorship had collapsed, drug trafficking filled the void in the favela that the government had neglected for nearly a century. Drug lords saw this as prime real estate to set up shop, selling firearms and engaging in various protection rackets. The drug lords set up independent pseudo-states within the city of Rio. They engaged in illegal taxation of residents, provided a pseudo law to the area that had long since been absent, and engaged in civil armed conflicts with other drug lords, battling over territory. It was like Dark Age England, except with AK-47s and cocaine instead of swords and wereguilds. Narco groups included Amigos dos Amigos, Tercero Comando Puro, and Comando Vermelho. Commando is the oldest active criminal organization in Rio, and they've engaged in truck hijackings, loan sharking, racketeering, as well as large scale bank robberies. These aren't small operations either. With all the crime money they earned from the anarchic state left by the Rio government, the drug lords bought tons of weapons, transforming themselves from smugglers into a new form of urban guerrilla. I mean, seriously, Amigos dos Amigos shot down a Phoenix helicopter with a bazooka. What more is there to say? In response to the drug warlords, militias formed for community self defense. They were mainly composed of ex Brazilian police, prison guards, and military members. You know, the first people you'd consider to be ideals of anti corruption and moral order within the Brazilian system. After all, they got the Bolsonaro thumbs up of approval. What could go wrong? A lot of things, apparently. The militias ended up extorting neighborhoods for taxes, becoming pseudo governments in their own right. They controlled civilian access to gas, land, and cable television. Oh, did I say they didn't sell drugs? Well, they did. Kind of. They leased land to drug lords to make a profit. The government responded to this increasing violence and unrest with UPPs, or pacifying police units, created to suppress narco violence. They had initial success in adding security to favelas, but often they'd engage in the same brutality that the old military regime was known for. There's a long history of Brazilian police mowing the lawn in favelas, periodically engaging in violent gun battles and attempts to kill narco kingpins in neighborhoods. They'd surround favelas before going in guns blazing. Being cornered, the narcos would of course fight back, leaving civilian casualties in their wake. Remember, favelas are places of extreme urban density. Now imagine shooting a gun in this place. I wonder if this reminds us of any other mowing the lawn operations. Cough, cough. They'd operate, then withdraw, wait for a new kingpin, then do it all over again. Of course, bodies piled up, and with it, public distrust grew. The favelas became an IRL arcane, an undercity complete with random police brutality, drug smuggling, and state neglect. Basically, free Zon, free the favelas. For real, for real. Only by the 1990s did Rio try to urbanize the favelas. Some infrastructure was given, including basic running water and sanitation, but the communities remained impoverished and under the thumb of narco militias. The state also continually tried to gentrify the favelas, which went about as well as you might imagine. Even if you were to install a millennial $20 burger joint in a favela, it wouldn't actually lead to less favelas. The now evicted residents either move to new informal houses further away in the city suburbs, or just become homeless, which is arguably worse. The Brazilian government did everything except give these people running water. Oh my god. Anyways, modern favelas include Morro de Providencia, Rocinha, Niter, Complexo de Senador, Camara, and Complexo de Alema. Some of these favelas have a population of more than 200,000 people. That's about the size of Spokane, Washington for context, all within these very compact areas. Okay, what's life like in a favela? One word: crowded. Families share one bedroom, staying out all day to avoid the cramp. They return home to avoid violence at night. Houses have improper cooling and need their roofs sprayed with water. There are open trash pits because the government is unconcerned with picking up the trash. Infrastructure is awful, homes are poorly built and are often built atop one another. There are no good amenities and lots of crime. For us Americans, libraries are public fixtures of public service, but favelas have to make their own libraries because the government couldn't be bothered. Of course, there are some better favelas than others. Unemployment is quite low in some South Zone favelas, at 5%. Near Rio's famous beaches, 92.2% of Chapéu Mangueira, a favela in the south, owns a cell phone, but there are favelas, especially in the north zone of Rio, with deeply entrenched poverty. Despite the mitigated oppression and terrible conditions, favelas still manage to have an inordinate outside impact on culture. Various religions prosper in favelas, including Umbanda and Candomblé, alongside a classic Roman Catholicism. Candomblé is an African diasporic religion which takes influences from the Yoruba, Bantu, and Gi groups, while Umbanda is a religion that combines Spiritism and Catholicism with the Candomblé of African diaspora. Recently, there's been a shift towards evangelicalism and Pentecostalism, because the only thing that Christians love to do more than anything is spread the good word to other Christians. There's a variety of music in the favelas as well, including funk, hip hop, and samba. Funk karaoke has grown in popularity worldwide, and bailes funk are thrown in the favelas. These dance parties play music popularized within the favelas for the favelas. Unfortunately, the favela has become a source of European and rich US tourist interest. Basically, rich people go to favelas to go on poverty safaris. I'm not saying this is deeply unethical. I'm just curious about the touristic potential of serving the tourists dachshund hot dogs. In all seriousness, this is wrong, and odds are you probably have a favela at home. Poverty is everywhere, and it's not getting perspective or whatever you think it is. It's gawking at the daily violence inflicted on people who don't deserve it. And don't get confused, poverty is violence. All the police brutality is just the most obvious form of it. If you can't wash your hair after a long day of work and you can't even deliver your mail, and all your stuff gets destroyed by water damage from your slumlord's one bedroom house, that's violence. There's very little long term government investment in the favelas outside of policing, which is crazy because these are citizens of Brazil and they are treated as if they were invisible. All the while, their culture is exploited for global profit and demand in the form of favela culture and favela funk. It's genuine rage bait. Basically, favelas are massive ghettos which, due to generational state negligence, have turned into cities within cities, complete with independent militias who dictate laws and exploit normal Brazilians. The government and elites within Rio society generally see the favelas as eyesores, not as humanitarian crises. They address the issue by evicting people in order to attract more tourists, which to them solves the real problem, the negative image that the favelas generate. All the while, those same rich travelers enjoy the favelas as some form of entertainment. It's actually sick. The government of Brazil needs to look in the mirror and give the people what they truly deserve. And what they deserve is dignity.